It was a season in my life that I would care not to relive again. Our middle son was in the hospital. He had a bone infection as a result of complications through chemotherapy because of leukemia that he was battling. My oldest son and my daughter and I traveled back from Little Rock visiting them, and we were hit by a drunk driver. That was a period of time that was filled with a lot of sadness, many tears, feelings of self-destruction, feeling as if everything was out of our control. It was a very difficult time. And in the midst of all of that sadness, the questions, sometimes deep anger, we had to find joy. We live in a very troubled world, and there are times that you may wonder, where is the joy? Where is the peace that we've all experienced or that we want to experience in the world? And how can I find some contentment in my life with everything that is going on? And right now, we are going through a difficult time. We've been dealing for basically 8-9 months now with this virus and the effects of it, and still a lot of questions and curiosity. What are we going to do about this? How are we going to handle it? When are we going to find a cure for it? When is this all going to be over with? And there's a part of us that wonders, can we just not go back to the way things used to be? Then, to complicate matters, there's racial tensions. Then there's the political landscape. What we call the polarization in America seems to be extremes, and anybody caught in the middle is all a part of this bickering and fighting that we see around us. We can't help but notice this growing hatred that the world has toward biblical principles, rather an intolerance of those who would stand up and say, this is wrong or this is right. We are living in a very difficult and very troubled time. So where do we find the joy? Think about this yourself. Talk about this with others that might be watching this with you. Will you be overcome with anxiousness? Or will you be overwhelmed with joy that comes from our God? Our text of study is Philippians chapter 4 and verses 4 through 14. Paul gives some very practical advice about dealing with the troubles that we have in this world and about the worry that we might have in regard to them. He says, don't be anxious or don't worry about anything. And he gives us advice about not leaning upon ourselves, but rather looking to God, who gives us His peace and who gives us His presence. Let's take a look at the text. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your graciousness be known to everyone. The Lord is near. Don't worry about anything, but in everything through prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any moral excellence, and if there is anything praiseworthy, dwell on these things. Do what you have learned and received and heard from me, and seen in me, and the God of peace will be with you. I rejoiced in the Lord greatly because once again you renewed your care for me. You were, in fact, concerned about me, but lacked the opportunity to show it. I don't say this out of need, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I find myself. I know both how to make do with little, and I know how to make do with a lot. In any and all circumstances, I have learned the secret of being content, whether well-fed or hungry, whether in abundance or in need. I am able to do all things through Him who strengthens me. Still, you did well by partnering with me in my hardship. Being a Christian in Philippi must have been a very difficult thing. The landscape in Philippi would have been that of Roman nationalism, but then also there would have also been the Greek culture of wisdom and pagan idolatry. And both of these would have looked at Christianity with disdain, with disgust, thinking this is utter foolishness. In the very least, they would have suffered mockery at the mouths of their friends. And Paul tells them, don't worry. Don't worry about anything. Have you ever had a bad day when things just don't go well and something wrong happens that makes the rest of the day just bad? And somebody says to you, don't let this ruin your day. That's kind of the way that I feel about when Paul says, don't worry about anything. Now, how can I not worry about anything when there's so much trouble in the world? Well, there's nothing wrong with having some anxiety, for having some worry. Paul worried. Peter says, cast your cares, cast your anxieties upon God. Even Jesus worried at times. There's a difference between having a worry and letting worry to overcome you, for your life to be absorbed with worry. It's like negative meditation. So Paul says, instead of worry, this is what I want you to do. First of all, rejoice and be calm. This is praise and prayer. Talking to God about who He is and talking to God about who we are. And God delights in that, but we need it. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. Keep celebrating our love of our King Jesus. Can you think about the times that you've been to youth rallies and we have sung songs together? Our hearts lifting up, our voices singing out, the entire room filling with the melody and the harmony of praise to God. It makes you feel good. It helps to wipe away some of that worry. But then there's also making our prayers, our petitions to God, asking Him to bless us with comfort and with peace. Now, God can provide us with His peace, which is different than the tranquility that we can experience out in the world and living just like everybody else, kicking back and enjoying and relaxing. Now, this is a peace that is beyond our understanding. It is something greater than we can even be able to put into words. And Paul reminds us that whenever we are praising God, whenever we are praying to God, God is meeting us in that praise and those prayers to provide a protection of peace around our very well-being, around our hearts. So instead of worrying, rejoice and be calm. As we continue in our text, verses 8 through 14, instead of worrying, we should watch and be content. What do you see around the world right now? You see an awful lot of anger, a lot of hatred. You hear bickering, talking back and forth. Physically, you might see riots. And there's an awful lot of negativity all around us, especially if you were to turn on the news, or you read the newspaper or magazines, or maybe you're scrolling through your social media accounts. And how can we escape the conversations that is all about the negativity that is in the world around us? Now, we need to make sure that we pay attention to those wrong things in the world. Even Paul was telling the Philippians back in chapter 3 to be watchful for some. He says they are enemies of the cross of Christ. And he describes them as whose end is destruction, whose God is their belly, and whose mind is on earthly things. But you follow Paul's example. That was what his encouragement, and his encouragement is still here. He says, look for the good things that you see in the world. Look for those things that are true. Look for those things that are honorable and just and pure and lovely. These are things that are praiseworthy. You think on these things. You observe these things. Recognize that there is good in this world. Now, ultimately, he says, follow me as the example as I am following Jesus. But it's not just to see the good that is out in the world, but to see the ultimate good of having God in our presence. And Paul describes this thing that he has discovered is the secret. Everybody has a secret. A secret of weight loss, a secret of how to study, a secret of how to have a clean house, the secret of how to manage your money well. Everybody has a secret of something, and usually that secret is, having an intelligent mind, having a talent for it, or developing a talent, or gathering up enough courage, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, that kind of thing, having the right mentality. But Paul says the secret is not what I find in here. Paul was a very strong guy, but he trusted not in himself, but in God. That was his secret. He had received a very generous gift from the church in Philippi. And so as he's writing back to them to thank them, he tells them, I was doing okay when I didn't have your gift. And I'm going to do okay now that I have your gift. Because I've learned in whatever circumstance I am in, whether that's negative or positive, I can be content. Because my strength doesn't come from here like the world says your strength needs to come from. My strength comes from God. And I have faith that He's not in a far off distance, but rather that the Lord is near. That God's presence is with me. That God that gives His peace, well, that God of peace provides His presence. One final thought. Having joy in difficult times. We all experience it, some worse than others. And if you haven't experienced much difficulty, one day you will. But when you are having joy in difficult times, remember that joy is a strength that comes from God and not something that you gather up from yourself. My hope and prayer for every single one of you is that everything that you are experiencing right now, everything that you are seeing right now, will cause you to want to cling closer to God than ever before. Keep praying, keep praising, keep looking for the good that is in the world, and learn to simply be content with having God in your life. God bless you all.